like you all to welcome Mr. Kevin Seward.
It's quite high up here.
Actually, it is. I think that's yours there.
Is it on?
Thank you so much. Kevin, absolute delight to have you here. And I have to say, it's actually wonderful to be with you in these surroundings. You won't remember this, but I have actually met you once before. And it was 2 years ago in Cardiff. And I was actually there to watch Northern Ireland play Wales in a pre-Euro 2016 friendly match. And I was absolutely elated when I discovered that the World Half Marathon Championships were on the same weekend. And the following day, I actually had the pleasure of meeting the Irish team. So I met Kevin, Sean, Thomas, and Sergio, and of all places, the cosmetic department of Boots in Cardiff. Now, I hasten to add, all of us were just passing through at the time. So say, it is absolutely lovely to meet you in more appropriate surroundings. Last night, I was actually talking to a friend of mine, and this would be just an interesting thing to start off with. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in LA, and he absolutely loves his running. In fact, last year he was telling me that he actually ran 2,922 miles in the calendar year. Now, he himself went to the Commonwealth Games, and he also went as an Olympian as well. It's Wayne McCulloch, the former WBC bantamweight world champion. And when I told him that I was going to be speaking to you tonight, he actually asked me to tell you that he follows running very, very closely. And he said that your performance in the Euros, he was just absolutely amazed by. But your amazing run on the Gold Coast, he said that in his opinion, that is the finest performance by a local sportsman in many a long year. So he asked me to give his congratulations to you, and he says he would love to go for a run with you, but after watching you, he says we'll maybe give that a miss until he gets a little bit fitter. The thing that he actually did ask, which I thought was a very, very good question, that speaking as a sportsman himself, after the season that you have had, when everything, it was an amazing year for you. And from his point of view, knowing what it's like himself to be at that level, he asked two questions. Firstly, while I'm sure you're welcoming the break that's coming to you, he said, is it in some ways you would like the season to carry on a little bit longer because the form that you've actually been in a way, it's very enjoyable as well.
If he flies me out to LA, I'll tell him. He makes a very valid point. When things are going really well, it's easy to want the season to continue. I took a nice break, 2 weeks, in 7 days of which were in New York. I would say I had days off running, but I probably walked 70 miles that week, so it's more than most people run the week. But he's absolutely right. When you've had a really good season, it's difficult to put that season to bed and close that season off, but it's really important that you do. So I had a nice break, helped me refresh physically and emotionally, and I'm back ready to go.
That's absolutely brilliant. And the other question that he just wanted to ask, before we get on to everybody else's questions, is the fact that knowing what it was like for him to compete in different environments, he actually wanted to know, was the Gold Coast the most oppressive conditions that you've ever actually had to perform in?
In a short answer, yes, absolutely. The long answer is when we were there for 2 weeks, so we had quite a bit of time to adapt to the conditions, but it still didn't prepare us for what happened in the days before the marathon itself. So temperatures were quite nice. High 20s. I mean, we all had the similar sort of temperature here. It was certainly pleasant. But in the day or two beforehand, the temperatures creeped up into the 30s, with reports on the day that it was going to be as high as 35, 36 degrees. Thankfully, that didn't materialise, but it was in the low to mid 30s. So it's by far the most difficult conditions that I've had to face. But it did mean tactically and strategically, you had to get things pretty spot on to get it right.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. I'd say it's wonderful that we're in this environment tonight because, I'd say, to bring it back to the start of your career, this is basically where it all kicked off. And I'd say the question that, and it's actually from Joe McAllister, and you'll have to excuse me because my eyes are no longer what they once were, so I'll have to lift this up to read this. But from Joe, he asks, how did you get into running, and were you always successful throughout your school days?
I think we joked earlier, somebody pointed at the board and said, there's not many pictures of you there. And they said, oh, that's right, you're a field footballer. I think a lot of people, when they join secondary school, still have ambitions of playing Premier League football. I was no different when I came to St Malachy's. There was a rich history of sport here and music. I won't sing, I'll save your ears. But when I came here, there was a rich tradition of sport and music here, and I was very quickly attracted to the sport side of things. The running club that existed here had so many positive role models. It was difficult to ignore it. So year 7 and year 8, so first year, second year here, 8 and 9 in this country, first year and second year here. I didn't run huge amounts. I played a lot of football, badly, but played a lot of football. Until one day I did quite well in the 3K run that I hope they still do. And that kind of inspired me to come along to the running club. It wasn't always easy. I had a pretty good first couple of races at it, and then things didn't go on the normal beaten track that I expected. I did find it tough. I can remember cold days in Mollusk, trooping around at the back, so far behind not only the older runners but the lads in my group that it was hard. It was challenging mentally then. But as a child, that helped build that sort of that resilience that's really important. I owe a lot to St Malachy's, not just for what they taught me in sport, but what they taught me in life. We had some fantastic teachers here, some great educators, and obviously some fantastic sports people.
It's wonderful. I mean, I noticed a quote from you, as I say in an interview, that said, my experience at St Malachy's helped to develop the resilience and determination that is needed to be a top marathon runner. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about when you say that?
It's exactly that. I mean, if you look on the wall, Gloria Bentus, and the most important thing for me was finding the glory from within, the thing that led me to be ambitious, and the things that inspired me to be hopefully successful in sport and successful in my career as well.
Yeah. And then, when was it that you actually realised that you did have something?
It took some time. It was probably closer to my sixth form here. I came back after a long summer and we went and did the Wallace Park Road Relays. I'm not sure they still exist, but they were fantastic. We did it every year, and when I came back in lower sixth, I actually ran really well there. I ran one of the fastest legs of the day, and I realised that potentially there was maybe something there. It turned out to be a fantastic season for me that year. I broke 15 minutes on the track for the first time, and began to think that maybe I do have a bit of a future in this sport.
And was that something that you developed from within, or was it through the influences of other people of such, or is that belief something which has to be engendered from within?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the peers that I was with at that time helped build my confidence, helped ensure that when I was having a tough day, we supported each other. We had a really good squad of athletes here. So the support came from my peers around me, but also it did come from within. I think it's the element of that resilience that I've been showing in year 7, well, first year, second year, and third year, finally paid dividends, because the hard work that I put in then sort of materialised with some results a bit later on.
And when you get the results, because obviously, Ulster Schools cross country, sort of many track titles, and then to take it on to a senior level, as I say, where basically you became one of this part of the world's best on track, country, and road. What is the thought process, which I would find very, very interesting? What is the thought process that, once again, is it something that develops naturally, or is it something that a lot of thought goes into, that basically you decided, well, I'm actually going to do the marathon? What thought process takes place there? Or is it just a case of throwing the dice and seeing what happens?
I think it was actually a little bit of an accident in some ways. I don't think it's hard to quote yourself as an accidental marathoner, but I offered to pace someone through halfway in Manchester in 2015, and unfortunately he got injured sort of 4 or 5 weeks out, and I thought, well, I've been running 100 miles a week, so let's up the long run a little bit and give this marathon a bit of a go. So I ran Manchester, which later turned out to be Manchester 25.2 miles, but I was happy for that, was fine. And was given a discretionary pick to European Championships in Zurich. So that kind of built the momentum in the marathon for me then. At that stage, I was very much making it up day by day and getting by on Google and every other resource I could find online and books that I could read. So I pretty much made it up through that way to the marathon. From then I met my coach, who's coaching me now, and things moved on from there.
And is it something, when you look back now, to have had so much success before even deciding to make the move up to the marathon, when you look back now, is part of you of an opinion, I maybe should have done this a little bit earlier, or would you be just off a mindset that, well, it happened when it happened?
The short answer is no. I'm glad it started when it started. The slightly longer answer is I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn about me, how I could cope with time management and the personal skills around running. I also had a lot to learn about training in itself. A lot of athletes who are very good juniors struggle to make that leap into senior sport, and I was very close to being one of those athletes. I think the sort of persistence through the tougher times helped. I think it's fair to say that a lot of athletes, including myself, suffer from a little bit of, I get competitive anxiety or a little bit of fear of failure, and that kind of plagued me through my early 20s into certainly mid-20s, where the thought of racing was more challenging sometimes than actually doing the training. So I had to battle that, and I had to learn how to get over that side of things before I embarked on the marathon. So I think if I had started sooner, maybe not have had the same results.
Yeah. So in a way, you've matured into things, both mentally and physically almost.
Absolutely. I think I became stronger mentally. I think physically I was always quite strong. I think mentally that needed to catch up, and eventually it did.
And it's funny because we've actually got a question here from Jerry McCabe, and his question is, at what age should an athlete consider doing a marathon?
It's a complex question. It's a good question. If we look globally, marathoners are coming to the sport a lot younger. If we look at even local athletes within the Celtic nations, you have marathoners in Scotland, Callum, coming out at 24, 25 years old and running 2:10 for the marathon. Dowie Griffiths joined at 26 and ran a very good 2:09, 2:08. So it's a complex question in that I don't think it's a physical age necessarily. Certainly there's too young an age. I don't think if you're in your teens and you think about a marathon, I'd suggest get a little bit quicker over the shoulder distances first. Enjoy doing sport, but enjoy doing other sports. If you are in your 20s and you feel mentally ready to embark on that journey, then I don't see there being a major issue with that.
So it's almost a natural process in a way.
Absolutely, it's hard to put a physical age on it. Some people's bodies develop at different rates, so physically and physiologically they could be ready to run one quite early, others a little bit later. So it's a judgment you make with an athlete in conjunction with their coach. The athlete will know their mind, the coach will know their athlete, and it's a joint decision.
It's funny, you've drawn attention already to the amount of different facets there are which go to make an elite athlete, or any athlete for that matter, because everything has to come together. And one area which I know a lot of people have asked questions about as well is nutrition in regards to training. And as I say, I actually feel very, very guilty even talking about this, sitting here beside this man, because I normally go down to Burger King for my nutrition, but that's another story. But
That's your mistake. It's McDonald's every time, isn't it?
we'll meet next year and I'll tell you how that gets on. But basically to ask you some questions about, as I say, that aspect of it, and I've one here from Ray Cameron. And Ray asks, can you tell me a little about your diet and how it supports your training and recovery, and then about your race day nutrition and refueling strategy?
So my diet in general is pretty normal. It's probably much like most of you guys. I eat a lot of healthier foods when I can. It's not always convenient. I do work, and I'm very grateful to the staff in the kitchen at work, because they, by my request, put sweet potato on the menu at lunch, so I can have a free lunch every day, which is fantastic. I tend to try to eat as healthy as I can, but without maybe overdoing it. I think everybody deserves treats, and we can reward ourselves when we've had good training days and things like that. But I very much pastas, potatoes, the traditional sort of stuff that you guys would eat at dinner time, cereals, porridges at breakfast time, and snacks in between. So it's nothing overly structured, in the sense that I don't really get nutrition advice from a nutritionist. I kind of just be sensible with what I eat and not overly controlled about it, just making sure that I'm getting enough of the right fuel. And when you're getting enough of the right fuel and you're running enough, then those little extra treats can come in and around it. Race day is a little more specific. If it's a race morning, I'm running a marathon, they're normally quite early. So the Gold Coast, as an example, was it was a 9:30 start, so it was a little bit late for those temperatures, but it meant that breakfast starts at around 5:30. I'm pretty strict on those days. I have porridge, and I make sure that I bring my own porridge with me. So I bring my own oats, and if I can get the kitchen there to make my porridge for me, then they'll do it. If I can't, I'll have it with some sort of non-fat yogurt that I can source in the days leading up to it, so I look for it then. I'll have brown toast, so wholemeal bread, and black coffee. Now, I made a mistake at Europeans this year, and I thought it would be smart and have a latte because it looked really nice, and it's certainly a mistake I won't make again, I think.
But once again, it's almost a repetitive process. You get into, it's a habitual thing, that basically you know what you're doing right, and by and large you know what not to do. Absolutely,
it's trial and error. So when you get to race day, you've probably prepared with lots of, for me, over the marathon distance, you've probably prepared with lots of long runs, and you've probably tried lots of different things in the build-up. Once you find the thing that works and it's not broken, then I wouldn't look to fix it.
Yes, indeed. And from the actual view of training, I've got a couple of very interesting questions here for you. The first one's from John Black of North Belfast. And John asks, do you do recovery runs? And if so, how do you approach these runs in regards to pace?
So yeah, I definitely do recovery runs. My week's structured relatively consistently. So similar sort of run on the Sunday, Monday, session on Tuesday, and Wednesday then would be more of a recovery day. I run by feel. I never go out the door with a pace in mind. Some days it's 7:30, 7:45 miling if it needs to be, and I allow my body to tell me how it's feeling. I feel my way into it. It may creep down, it may get a little quicker, but it's certainly never any quicker than 7-minute pace. I would wear my heart rate monitor more on my easy days than I would do on my hard days, just to make sure that I'm not clipping along too quickly. Sometimes when you've had 2 or 3 really good days of training, that 4th or 5th day is the important one, and it's important not to go too hard on those days.
And it's one of those things, once again as well, it's the inner voice. I take it you're not one of these people that, when I say worries too much, but basically you know yourself what you should be doing. Once again, it's that sort of thing. You're not putting yourself under pressure because you know what you're going to be doing.
If my body's tired, it's tired for a reason, and it's normally because I've done quite a bit of the right stuff in the build-up. So no, absolutely not. I don't worry. If I go out the door and I'm not feeling particularly great, I run easy until it feels good. And if that easy pace is what some people would consider to be maybe too easy, then that's what it is that day. So there's no fuss or panics.
And from it says David Allen here, but I know him as Davey. What pace relative to your targeted marathon racing pace do you run your long runs at?
It's a good question. So it depends on the distance of that long run. So we do various different types of long runs. So 3 or 4 weeks out, we'll do a 15-mile long run, and that's usually 10% slower than marathon pace. So if you're hoping to run 5:08 per mile, then you work it back from that. The longer runs, so we cover 26.2, probably 2 or 3 times in the marathon phase, maybe. And it often starts out a little bit easier. So for me, wanting to build up to Europeans, I'd start out at 5:45 pace, and I'd bring it down 15 seconds a mile each 10k block, right down to sometimes down around 5:15, 5 maybe just inside.
And in the season that you've just experienced, how difficult is it at the outset of that when you know that you basically have to peak twice in the course of the year, different conditions, but basically putting yourself through the same process? How difficult is that physically and mentally?
It wasn't too bad this time, actually. The second, when I ran Gold Coast at Easter. I took a couple of weeks nice and relaxed and easy, week off, built back up into things, and I always knew from there it was going to be an 8-week block the second time round into the Europeans. There was no panic. I knew a lot of the work had been done for the first phase, and as long as I recovered well, then a lot of that work would transfer and carry over to the second marathon build-up. The long run wasn't quite as long in the second phase for the second marathon. And we did do a little bit of sharper stuff in the middle. There wasn't much racing, and that was the more mental side of things. I think you come back from the Gold Coast. I got back in on a Monday night. Actually, it was Monday morning, and arrived back into Loughborough at 6 a.m. and was in school at 7:30 a.m. So straight back into life and getting on with things. So it was important that I did recover physically and mentally. Yeah. Going back to school just changes my mindset, puts things into perspective and moves things on a little bit. And for me, mentally, it's a change of stimulus.
And that's a very important thing. Obviously.
Absolutely.
It's just another couple of quick questions. Say, how do you record your training, and what various paces do you still train at? What is the sort of a tempo that you would normally use?
So recording training wise, I'm pretty old fashioned, so I write a lot of things down. I don't have it on now. I do have a Garmin. I don't use Strava. I know a lot of people do, and will probably hiss at me for that, but I don't use Strava. I do use Garmin Connect. Just uploads automatically from my watch. I don't pay too much attention to it. I still go then and write things down. I think it's really important to do that. I then attach a thing, an RPE, so how it felt for me on that day. So I'd score out of 10. I'd say, well, that was a 4 or a 3. And if you get quite skilled at using that process, you can sort of say, well, at the end of a 7-day training week, if you've scored over 60, you've scored yourselves a lot of 9s and 8s that week, you need an easy week, you need to back it off a little bit. So I definitely record other things in there. So if I've had a tough day at work, it's been a long day, I've ran from work, I've ran to work. It's important to note that down as well, just so you're keeping on top of things that way. Training pace wise, various different paces depending on what I'm doing. So at this time of year, we're probably around 70 to 80 miles a week. I do a lot at around 6-minute pace, 6-minute miling. So be standard sort of Monday, 10 miles at 6-minute pace. Tuesday would be an interval session. Wednesday would be the recovery run that we talked about. Thursday would either be a day off if I needed it, or some easy running. Friday threshold, and then Saturday would be some 6-minute pace stuff, and I'm back on to usually 15 miles in 90 minutes on the Sunday.
And variation in training, obviously very important physically, but mentally is it important as well?
I think we follow fairly similar weeks. I don't often repeat the same session in the same block because it's too easy to draw comparisons and start chasing values. I find changing where I train is almost as important as changing what I do. So I like to vary the surface, vary the locations, change where I run, which helps me then again not race yourself in training and chase those splits.
Yeah, super. And another couple of questions here as well from Glenn Pollock. And Glenn's question is, do you build core exercise into your training programs to help prevent injuries?
Only if my strength and conditioning coach is watching, then the answer is yes. Interestingly, no, I didn't, is the answer. I went out to Australia. I'm very grateful to the athletics NI team physios and team NI physios who were there, because I arrived out, it was snowing quite heavily. I'm not sure if it was the same here, but in Loughborough we had a lot of snow. And for some reason, my glutes stopped doing their share of the work, got a little bit lazy, and my quads did a whole lot more. So when I arrived out to Australia, after every training session, I was struggling to move up and down stairs. It was almost like I'd done the marathon already. And the physios there and the strength and conditioning guys there were like, "Oh, so what sort of physio regime have you followed?" And I said, "I go every week." And I said, "Nothing." And they're like, "Nothing, okay, right, okay. I can take that. What about your S&C?" Stop short of asking me what I squat, but what about your S&C? And I said, none, again. So from then on, we got back going, got quads sorted, and just in the nick of time, thankfully. And I made a promise that once I came back, I would consult a strength and conditioning coach and start doing some strength and conditioning. I think it shows. So I now do follow a program. It's very early into that program, but it does include a lot of core activities and squats and glute stuff to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
And from Conan McCackey, the quality of your training is incredible. What is the best advice you'd give to recover between runs whilst working full time?
It's a good question. I would like to say I think about it quite a lot, but I don't. Sometimes it's hard. For me, the change of stimulus I mentioned earlier is really helpful, because mentally I switch off. I get up early during a marathon phase. I could be running 13.1 miles, starting at 5:30 a.m. So it's pre-breakfast and usually depleted. And then head into work all day. And being a PE teacher, if it's a heavy day, it's 5 lessons, it's 5 hours, it's on your feet for 5 hours, and then often a session in the evening. I just make sure I get plenty of fluid, I drink plenty, I eat plenty as well throughout the day, and in those sort of days my nutrition does become important. I do make sure I'm getting a lot of those complex carbs and fueling up quite well, a little bit of protein. The most important phase for me of that is sleep. I'm a stickler for it. I think even if I was working hard and you had maybe Ofsted in the next day or something, dreaded craziness was happening, I would close the books at 9 o'clock and I'd be in bed for 9:30 and sleep by 10. I think it's really important that sleep is hugely underrated in the recovery process. Before we look at what our nutrition is and everything else, we look for those little gains. It's the big gains that you get from the simple things like our recovery, like our sleep, that are really important.
It's funny, Kevin, you were saying earlier on about one of the important things is possibly not to worry about things. But it's a question here that ties in with this, that obviously there's an element of pressure. There's a lot of pressure with what you do, and obviously tied in with the training aspect as well. How do you know that you're not overtraining, and what steps do you take, if any, to basically just keep a gauge on things?
So I use my own RPE type idea. So I know how hard days should feel, and I judge it by that. So I keep a score over the week. I wear my heart rate monitor. I don't wear it in hard sessions. I don't need to know I'm working hard. I wear it on my easier days just to keep control and keep a cap on things then. I'd often wear it, say I was doing a 10 mile in 60, I'd wear it because I would know that if it's fluctuating more than sort of 10 beats, then we might have some difficulties and we back things out a little bit. But it's more knowing your internal load. You should have a good perspective of how you feel, and if things are feeling harder than normal for a couple of days in a row, then you know that you're probably due to back it off just a little bit before anything sinister happens. And
one of the running themes that is really starting to develop is the mental aspect. Obviously, physically wise, it's essential, it's so important. But the mental aspect, if it's possible, just to ask you a couple of questions on that. a very good friend of mine is a guy called Stephen Kirk. Stephen was an elite boxer and was a Commonwealth gold and a World Championship medalist at senior level. And one of the questions that Stephen wanted to ask you, because once again, comparing his career to what you do and what you've been achieving, one of the questions that Stephen wanted to ask you was, for him, his career was about specific moments. And from a mental point of view, what he would like to ask is, was there mentally a specific moment in your career where you felt a sense of belonging and a sense of being very comfortable at elite level? Was there a light bulb moment almost?
I'm not sure it was a light bulb moment necessarily. I alluded to the fact earlier I ran my debut marathon in Manchester and ended up at European Champs in Zurich. Now that all happened so quickly because I was novice to it. I was really lucky to have run for Ireland as a junior, but I hadn't run for Ireland as a senior. And I arrived at the team hotel in Zurich and realised that I'm around Olympic medalists. Rob Heffernan and other athletes were there, and my confidence wasn't particularly high at that stage. You walk in, you think, do I actually belong? Do I really belong here? After the race, I spoke to the director of endurance at that time, it was Chris Jones, and he said, do you want to go to the Olympics? I said, well, stupid question. Doesn't every runner? And he said, well, I think you have the ability. You just need to believe in it a little bit. You need to find a coach, and you need to believe that you have that talent to go to the Olympic Games. So I think for me, that moment there was somebody sort of validating what I was doing and sort of having that little bit of extra belief in my talent. I had a lot of belief from a lot of sources throughout my career, but when you arrive on a camp for your first time and you're there on your first major championships and someone says, well, listen, you might actually have a shot at going to the Olympic Games, that sort of, I guess, is close to the light bulb moment.
As silly as it sounds, with what has happened to you over the last few years, which is so much validation of what you do you validate things for yourself now, or is it still important that basically you do get a word in your ear from time to time for either reassurance or confidence or, proverbial kick up the bum when it's needed?
Everyone needs that. Yeah. I think everyone needs that. There's times where I do get a phone call from my coach, who is a very persuasive criminal lawyer, and when he talks to you, he instills that confidence in you without really having to say huge amounts. The way he conducts it, the way his rhetoric and his narrative to you helps instill that confidence. But I think your own validation of self-confidence comes from things like your training diary. When you look back at it and you say, well, look, it's a 16-week marathon block. I've hit 16 weeks. There hasn't been a single problem. That's validation. Or remembering why you do it. Running it's a very, I think it was described once as cross-country, certainly the greatest team sport in the world, because you're fighting for people even when you're not in a winning position yourself. But running is very selfish in some ways, and you got to remember that the real reason you're doing it, you're not doing it for anything else other than the fact that you love the freedom of running. And sometimes it's good just to go out on a run, leave your watch at home, just reflect on the fact that you're grateful for the fact that you can do it.
It's funny, you saying earlier at the start of this that you had a great passion for playing football. And from time to time, people discuss the aspect of that some people are comfortable playing team sports. A lot of other people tend to gravitate towards individual sports. As I say, with yourself, do you miss the team ethic at all? Obviously not because of what you've achieved, but say having came from a team background at an early age, as I say, was that an easy move to make, so to speak?
I do miss games. I miss playing team games, but it was an easy decision. I loved playing football. It was fantastic. Like I said earlier, I wasn't very good at it, but I loved playing football and I loved playing team sports. So much so that even up to if my coach is watching, he's going to tell me off, but even up to Berlin the first time around 2015, I was still playing in a five-a-side league in Loughborough. Stop pointing at the camera, I know. A five-a-side league with other athletes, some from here, Gareth Turnbull, Ricky Sis, a few other guys. We played on a Monday night in a leisure league. So I got my fill of team sports right up until then. So once I started running internationally, I very quickly decided to prioritise things.
So basically, you're the third after Martin O'Neill, Stephen Morrow, who I believe came from here. You could have been the third, as I say, great footballer from St Malachy's.
If you had watched me play, you'd soon lose that idea.
We've got a question from Daniel O'Callaghan, and he asks, what helped motivate you, and could it help motivate others?
It's a good question. I think the motivation has to come from inside. It can't be extrinsic. It has to be intrinsic. You have to think about why you're actually doing the sport. It's a very personal battle. It could be a PB. It could be to run a new event. Maybe you've not done a 10K before and that's your next challenge. That for me would be the motivation. Once you find that sort of challenge and that persistent challenge and changing the intrinsic motivation for it, then it's really important. I don't think it's a good place value to put a lot of your motivation on the extrinsic rewards or the output, so times or things like that, but certainly the process and the journey of starting a new event or doing something new is what motivates me.
And also, as I say, a question from Gladys Gagnon. And she asks, what are your mental strategies for dealing with the pressure of championship races?
The last championship race I really felt pressure in was probably the Olympics. And what brought that pressure on, I was having a fantastic time, I was quite relaxed, and what brought it on was getting a little bit ill. And I think I let it consume me a little bit. So I made a promise to myself then that every championship I went to, I'd enjoy. So when I was in Australia, I went to Coomabah Nature Reserve, I went to see some koalas and play with the kangaroos and all sorts of other stuff that you do that kind of takes you away from every other aspect. I'm not used to doing nothing, and for me, the 2-3 weeks when you're on a camp pre-championships can be really, really damaging. So it's important that for me that I find stuff to do, and I not overdoing it. I'm not going away to be a tourist. I am there to do a job, but also to keep myself active physically and as well as mentally by doing different things. So it's really important if you find that there's a pressure at a championship and you feel that pressure, that you find what it is that can release that pressure for you. And for me, it's just getting about as much of a normal life as I can.
It's absolutely brilliant, because I suppose the intensity. I remember being told that by a couple of those guys that were going to World Championships and Olympics, that it is so easy to get caught up in the intensity of the situation that you're actually in.
Absolutely. If we go back to 2016, you walk into the Olympic the village, and you can feel the pressure when you walk in there. You can almost see the tension. People are competing all the way through the time you're there. So we were in the village for a week. Some people would have been finished competing, but a lot of people were coming back from competition, and the pressure was coming back with them, and it was leaving with them in the morning as they left out for their next day's events. So even if you're still far enough away from your own event, it's hard to not experience that pressure and buy into that pressure. I mean, we all love going to a hotel, don't we? Like if we go on a holiday, but there's nothing worse than being in a hotel for 2-3 weeks before an event and thinking about, only thing you're thinking about is the competition, the event there.
And along with that, because obviously the year that you've had, and as I say, the amount of congratulations, very, very well deserved as well, and it's wonderful here tonight to congratulate you with everybody here. But of course, the fine line that you walk being an elite athlete, and it is a very, very fine line, because you're literally one movement away from being in the form of your life to being in a very, very bad way. And that's one of the questions that's came up as well, that, as I say, how have you coped with setbacks when they have happened to you?
I've been very fortunate. Not superstitious, my last serious injury was just before Manchester. I broke my foot playing football. But yeah, no, I fractured some metatarsals and missed 7 or 8 weeks of running, or training should I say, and then it was probably another 7 or 8 weeks before I started doing anything serious again. And that was the last big injury I had. I've managed to go through every marathon phase since, 16-week blocks or 8-week blocks for the Europeans in the summer, relatively unscathed. The Commonwealth, pre-Commonwealths was the first time I've had anything that was sort of worried me a little bit with regards to not getting back from things on time. So in terms of dealing with setbacks, I'm relatively untested, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have the answer to that question. But I think again, it's having confidence in what you have done. Setbacks often come around as a result of maybe training or life circumstances, but everything you've done in the build up to that is still there, and it's important to take confidence from all the training you have done. So if you've missed a couple of days or a week or 2 weeks, then you've had years of training, you've had years of making yourself the athlete that you are, and you draw upon those experiences to support you.
And on top of that, just talking about the years of experience that you have had, there's an ideology almost nowadays that, and it's very sad to hear, but as I say, there's an ideology that the Harrier tradition of athletics has died to a certain extent. And you know, when you look at a lot of elite athletes nowadays, so much of it is the fact that it's anything but glamorous. But to the outside eye and to the man in the street, it looks quite glamorous because it's full time and, you know, warm weather training, etc., etc., etc. The fascinating thing about yourself, and you know, it's not that it's a best kept secret, but you know, say, even speaking about you to a couple of people, and they've been absolutely amazed to hear that, you know, you work full time, and you know, in a roundabout way, for me personally, you epitomise the true Harrier tradition in the sense that you train full time, you work full time. Have you ever considered going full time and the possible benefits in inverted commas that would bring? Or in a bizarre way, and I remember it with the great GB athlete Peter Elliott back in the day, who basically would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to run and then go and work for British Steel during the day in quite a manual sort of job. But does the aspect of working full time bring qualities to your career that mightn't be there if you were just a full time athlete?
It brings me perspective. I don't think it's no coincidence that I started running a little bit better in 2015. And 2015 I took up a leadership position at school, which is probably the last thing you want to do when you're thinking about seriously starting training. But for me, it provided that little bit of perspective. I go into school and the children don't care if I had a bad session that morning. You know, they don't care if you know, I've had a bad session the night before, or I've not finished a workout, or they're not bothered. They're just, every day's a new day for them, and the excitement that they bring every day sort of is hard not to be infectious. So if I go into work and I'm in a bad mood, it's difficult to still be in a bad mood by lunchtime, unless you're teaching maths every day. But no, I'm joking. It's difficult to be in a bad mood by lunchtime because of all the weird and crazy things that children in school do. So working full time provides me that perspective, provides me the routine, and has taught me to manage time a lot more effectively. I'm not sure how structured my days would be if I didn't work. I'm not sure what time my first run would be done at. Midday.
And also, as I say, you touched on earlier regarding, as I say, coaching, validation, people basically being around. And I read a quote from your good self saying that the advice as a young guy starting out that you received from Paddy McKillop, you still carry with you to this day. And obviously the success that you've had with Andy, who you were just talking about a little bit earlier. If it's possible, what value do you put on a coach, and can you explain that relationship? You know, it's a funny thing. I remember speaking to an elite athlete once, and he described, I won't use the terminology that he described, but he was talking about a coach of his on the Ireland team, and he said to me, he is an out and out, but he's an absolutely fantastic coach. And I'd say, so can you explain how important a coach is to yourself? Because obviously, with it being an individual sport, with people just seeing your name, people just seeing you on the television screen, seeing you go past on the road, how important is that relationship, and what qualities do they bring to yourself?
I've been really lucky. I've had 2 or 3 really good coaches in my running career so far. I say so far, 2 or 3 running coaches. My first coach here was very briefly Dr. John Moran, and he coached a lot of the Seward guys here through the years. He went on to be head teacher here, and kind of passed athletics on to Paddy McKillop. Paddy was very different to Andy in his approach to coaching, but both had the same sort of qualities. They were able to communicate their vision of how they saw running for me playing out, and how they saw running for the teams that I was running for. So here, running for St Malachy's, what the short-term and long-term plans were and long-term goals were. So I was able to buy into that quite easily. With Andy's, I think people have this idea of elite coaches being very controlling and very demanding and everything else. Andy's not at all. He's very relaxed. Too relaxed sometimes. He's got one key word, and it's the one key word, regardless of what happens, is perfect. So Andy, the session went terrible, perfect. Andy had a great day, perfect. And it's just always the same sort of relaxed sort of attitude to things, and that relaxed attitude works for me. And it doesn't work for everyone. Some people like the coach you referred to, but for me, Andy's coaching ideologies have worked really well. It's very relaxed attitude. He communicates exactly what he expects, and I'm in no short experiences as to what that is. But if things don't go according to plan, it's no panic, it's no worries, it's just everything's perfect. That relationship is really important. I think there's definitely a fit, and you got to find the fit for you as an athlete, and the coach has got to find the type of athletes that they want to coach. Some athletes need rein back in, and you need a good, strong coach that does that. I've heard stories of coaches in various other athletes, and they come in and say, I ran my splits, I ran today, you gave me 10 by K, you wanted me to run 3 minutes, I ran 2:55, and the coach has hit the wall. And some athletes need that. Some athletes need to be told, that's not what I told you to do. I told you to be sensible today, and you've not done that. I've heard of coaches stopping sessions because athletes are running too fast, and some people require that. Others need that little bit of a kind of a G on and push on. But it's finding the right fit, finding the coach that suits you, and then the coach finding the athletes that matches their vision and their ideologies.
And I suppose as well too, just that great ability that it's the comfortable aspect that you basically listen and they listen to you as well.
It has to be, absolutely. It's based on that respect, isn't it? A lot of coaches are volunteers, and we can't ever criticise the hard work that they put in. It doesn't always go the way we think it should, but as volunteers, we have to support what they do. A lot of elite coaches are volunteers as well. Andy is a volunteer. He doesn't get paid for coaching, and we have to remember that when they're doing things, they're doing it often off their own goodwill.
It's absolutely brilliant. I just have one more question, and then we're going to open it to the floor, because I'm sure a lot of guys will have questions for you. It would be greatly remiss of me if I didn't actually just ask you a very simple question. What are the plans for the next couple of years? And say, what are the aims?
It's a good question. So I have a lot of short-term goals at the moment. So I've got some process goals, dealing with getting stronger in the gym, working on my strength and conditioning, the things that I neglected for a while. I'm going to start working on and improving those over the short term, and hopefully building into a nice long-term cycle with that. Competition-wise, I made a promise to myself this autumn that I'm going to race a lot more. I'm going to enjoy getting out and running all sorts of distances, 5k, 10k, and sort of steering clear of some marathons in the short term. 3 in 12 months was just about my fill. So I'm going to enjoy running a lot of the shorter events. Then hopefully we'll look maybe towards Doha in 2019, although that was due to kick off a year yesterday. And the reports from Doha was it was nearly 40 degrees, and at marathon time it was due to be 37. So I'm not sure, in terms of recovery from that could be quite difficult if you've got aspirations of looking at Tokyo in 2020. Tokyo is also going to be quite hot, but I feel that if you run Doha, there could be a risk of maybe not recovering in time to run a fast marathon the following spring in order to qualify for Tokyo. So both are still currently in my plans, but we'll make a bigger decision on that closer to the time.
That's it, Kevin. That's absolutely superb. And as I say, we've got so many people here, and I'm sure a lot have questions for you. So, as I say, are the guys about with the mic? I say, cheers. It's Pearson Connell, and as I say, they're going to take. So, does anybody have any questions for Kevin?
Welcome home, Kevin. Very nice listening to you.
Thank you very much.
I actually thought the fastest of the long distance runner, the longest long distance runner was gone, but since I'm sitting here listening to you, you seem to be running all these miles on your own. Is that a fact?
Yeah, that's true. I run quite a few on my own. I'm based in Loughborough, so there's always runners around, but the unsociable hours that I tend to train means I do quite a bit on my own. I do have one or two stalwart runners who come out certainly one or two mornings a week, but mostly a lot of the mileage will be done solo.
So what was wrong with running your own?
Yeah, most of them, yeah.
I take it lost contact with you a bit, but you're not married?
Is that an offer? I'm not at the moment, no, but I do have a fiancée. We're getting married back in Largefield Estate, actually, in April.
Your time management's brilliant, Kevin, so it's a big change.
I haven't told her this is live, so we can work out a plan as how this doesn't have to change.
Just potentially the show here, like what's the best aerobic session you do? What is it? 60 or 9? 10 to 1,000? What is it?
So I still classify 6 mile as mostly an aerobic session for me, but my favourite session would be we do a thing called K floats, K in and outs. So we run a kilometre at somewhere between 2:55 and 3 minutes, and then we float out to somewhere around 3:20, and we'll probably do anywhere between 18 to 20 kilometres, so between 9 and 10 sets of that. Yeah.
Sorry, is there anybody else? Just John here.
Hi Kevin.
How are you? Okay?
Hello today.
Thank you.
I come from a marathon background, but I find that the hardest part of marathon training would be fueling before and after. And just want to know, do you fuel before your long runs?
So I don't go particularly crazy. I think the modern advances in sports drinks and gels and things makes it easier to fuel during the run.